deliberate strategy, really capable people that know a lot about service, much more than I do, putting the money where your mouth is and behind it, and then just having a long-term commitment. And you go from what our perceived and what our actual experience was from a service perspective to now being one of the best in the country and still having ambition to improve even further.
Welcome into Layers LCG. I'm your host, Zane Inglis. We share insights related to leadership, change and growth. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, CEO of ONE New Zealand, one of New Zealand's largest telcos, Mr. Jason Paris. Thanks for joining us.
Kia ora, Zane. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on. It's we've had a pleasure of chatting a couple of times over the past year, and I really thought it'd be great to get you on. Having been in business and successful leadership positions, I'm sure you're really well known throughout the New Zealand business community. But I think over the last year, through your rebrand with ONE New Zealand and your association with the ONE New Zealand Warriors, you've become a bit of a household name in New Zealand and maybe even in Australia these days. So I thought it'd be great to get you on and sort of share your story and let people know how you went from becoming a pack and save worker in Southland to becoming one of the most successful CEOs and leaders in New Zealand.
I'm happy to help. A lot of it comes down to marrying a good woman and luck.
Yeah, I hear that. So I'd like to start off, before we jump into too much about, your current role and your, your methodologies related to leadership and so forth, giving people a little bit of a background on where you come from and where you grew up and perhaps what you were like as a young fella.
Yeah, so my mum had me when she was 16 years old. So she was a teenage mum. My father left straight away, and he didn't come back. So I never had a dad in my life. But mum's parents, my grandparents, are very close to me, and her brother, they kind of brought me up. And we were pretty poor. Mum was on DPB, social welfare, housing, all that kind of stuff. Lots of people have those stories. The reason I tell that context, though, is we moved around quite a lot. And so I think that correlates to the fact that I'm actually, I like change. And I have no problem at all being in different environments with a whole bunch of different people and feel quite comfortable about that. When you're when you're a team with your mum and she's a solo mum and a young one like that, you get given responsibility quite early. So the responsibility I had as a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old might be a little bit different to other households. And so I've always been asked to be a part of and contribute quite early on and not be afraid of that. So it means never been afraid of having responsibility or giving it a go. And then the other thing for me, Zane, is didn't necessarily have a lot, but I had a lot of love. And I knew that my mum and my grandparents believed in me. And when I talk to any organisation that works with, especially the younger New Zealanders coming through that have the potential to go off the rails, they often say the one thing that'll make the difference in that young person's life is having just one person that really genuinely believes in them. And I had about 3 or 4. So I feel pretty privileged. So that's where I came from. Southland, and Invercargill boy. Whenever someone says, "Where are you from?" I say I live in Auckland, but I'm from Southland. Southland's my home. I head down there quite a lot. My mum, up until last year, was a freezing worker at Alliance. Her partner Barry, he's been in my life for 25 years. He's my kids or our kids' granddad. He drives a crane at TY. So real working class family, and most of my mates are still down home in Invercargill as well. So I'm very passionate about Southland and Southlanders.
Sounds like your experience has probably made you grow up quite quickly. But looking back in your primary school days, or even into your early high school days, were you although you had responsibility, were you, a hard worker at school and focus on study, or were you more out and about with your friends or playing sport?
My 7th form year was, I got a degree in cards and touch rugby, I like to say. So I was pretty studious early on, from a school perspective and tried really hard. And then, I don't know, like a lot of teenage boys, girls, sport, got a little bit distracted. So transitioned to just doing enough to get by, kind of approach. So I was sport mad. I think regional lifestyle, it's one of those things where you jump on your bike at 7:30 in the morning and you don't come home till 7:30 at night. And if you do, you're only there to eat.
Right.
So sport was a big part of my life. My grandfather actually played for the All Whites.
Wow.
So he was a big soccer player. So I'd play in the winter soccer on Saturday morning, rugby Saturday afternoon, and league for the Panthers on Sundays. So and in Invercargill, and when I was coming through the grades, didn't force you to choose until you're quite late in your teenage years. So it's a bit different to now, how when you're about 10 or 11, you've got to kind of commit to one sport. I was playing all three sports right in my teenage years, which was awesome. And then in summer it was touch and cricket. Represented Southland in all of those sports, so soccer, awesome. Rugby, cricket, and touch. So did okay, but I knew I was never going to be anything too special because one of my teammates was Jeff Wilson.
Okay.
And so when you're on a cricket field with him or a rugby pitch with Jeff, you can tell pretty quickly that there's a difference between him and everyone else, including myself.
Yeah, I think my wake-up call was when I was in a trial game back in about second form, I think it is year 8 these days. And it was for the Hutt Valley reps. And at the end, we had to do a sprint, and I was playing prop at the time. And this other guy who was in the trials from Wainui took off, and he was finished before we got to about halfway. It turned out it was Tana Umaga playing tight head prop back in the days. So yeah, you definitely do get to see the difference pretty quickly when you're surrounded by greatness. So when you left school, you went through to seventh form. What did you start out doing there in your first?
Well, actually, I applied for teachers training college in my seventh form year, and I got declined.
Wow!
So I wanted to be a school teacher, and I had university entrance and a B bursary. So not sure why I got declined actually, but what happened was I was on a rugby Southland trip to the West Coast. We were playing a South Island tournament on the way home. The manager of the Southland rugby team, he was the manager of Trust Bank Southland, a guy called Murray Heath. He actually played halfback for Southland. He said to me, do you want to come and work at the bank for me? And stay in Southland and not go to uni and play rugby here. And I just explained my background. University wasn't really an automatic path for me, or actually the majority of my friends. Most of us gravitated to work, so a big line of freezing workers. And so bringing income in was probably held in much higher value than actually additional academic study. So took the job at Trust Bank Southland, and I really enjoyed it, like meeting people. I was everything from checkbooks to customer services to tellers to insurance to lending. So it was quite a broad range of experiences and training that I got. But I remember someone came in when I was in tellers one day, and they were earning 10 grand more than I was. And I was like, what do you do? They said, I'm a radio sales person. And I was like, ooh. How do you get a job being in radio sales? And they said, well, you just give them a call. And I did. And I got a job in radio sales. And so I started in sales, and then my career moved to kind of sales and marketing. And I've come through the ranks across a whole bunch of different industries with a sales and marketing background, but without having a university qualification.
I think it's an interesting one I come across. There's a lot of friction often between sales and marketing, because in large organizations, one of the least maybe tertiary educated parts of a big organization is sales, because it's just people who go out there and start doing it and learn from experience. And a lot of times the marketing team have been through MBAs and have done the theoretical study. and they struggle to kind of comprehend each other. So it's always interesting to see a leader who's started in sales at the cold front and then moved into marketing and probably acquired that, through experience rather than study. It probably helps your marketing, your sales teams now kind of collaborate quite well, does it?
It does. But what I'd say the common denominator between sales and marketing is people. So I just love people. So I've always enjoyed talking to them, understanding them, listening to them, learning from them. And the best sales, the best marketers, I think, love people and love being with them and love helping them and doing good things with them. So there's a common denominator there. But yeah, like I've been in marketing and called the sales teams the show ponies, and I've been in sales and called the marketing team the colouring department. So I know both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have both. I was in sales for years before I got into marketing, and I remember buying a book at the airport once, like, what is marketing? I used to talk about it a lot, but I had no idea actually what it meant. But I think they're both quite commonsensical, you're right, and it's about connecting with the people, but sometimes it can get a little bit overcomplicated. So did you have a dream growing up, other than before you decided you wanted to be a teacher? Like, is it to be a fireman or to,
No, I was actually genuinely to be a teacher.
Wow.
So that was always my career goal.
What inspired you or made you aspire to want to be a teacher?
I don't know. I think probably because I had a lot of people in my life going through school that I think everyone's got this. That one or two teachers that made a difference in your life. Mine was Primer 1, Miss Hardy. Made a really big difference. And I don't know. I just it was something that I kind of gravitated towards. But I now know that it wasn't really what was going to light my fire. Like as soon as I started in sales and then in marketing, I was obsessed with it. Like I just loved the science behind sales, the science behind marketing, the people behind sales and marketing, the dynamics. So yeah, I've loved that. I've loved those two areas right from the start. And I have always I've always gravitated towards organisations that have a large that put a large importance on sales and marketing. I think my first real kind of honing of my marketing skills was when I was in McDonald's. So it's a very marketing led organisation. You own the P&L. So you've got everything from customer segmentation to product creation to being in the restaurants and looking at how you make it to minimize wastage, working with supply chain on costs, pricing, margin, go to market. That was a period that probably gave me more marketing sophistication than I had previously by not going through university and not having that structure and that discipline.
Yeah.
That was kind of real world. It was a real world university qualification on the job, which was great.
Yeah, I think that's one benefit listening to and also looking through your CV there is working for large organizations that have a lot of structured training. So, you get a lot of the benefits of formalized training, even though you weren't actually in a university. But at what point did you sort of realize that you enjoyed being a leader of people? I mean, obviously there's project leadership where you coordinate a lot of things, but you're actually as a leader where people are following the decisions you make and you have to deliver success through people rather than doing it yourself personally.
There was a moment when I was 14 years old and I was playing for Southland Soccer, and the New Zealand under 16 soccer team was touring the country, and I was 14, but I got selected in the under 16 Southland team, and then I got made captain by a guy called Fred Simpson. And I remember just being stunned when he said, "Jason, you're the captain for this game." Now, I think we got spanked 9-1 or something like that. So it wasn't necessarily a massively successful first example of leadership, but I really enjoyed it. it made me. I like the responsibility of made me even more determined to do whatever I could and sacrifice myself for the team. And I quite enjoyed that. And then I've never really asked for leadership roles, but I've never been afraid to take them when they've been presented at the same time. And so just been lucky enough that opportunities have been presented and I've always said yes, and they haven't, and I've learned and developed along the way. So even within radio sales, when I had that job that I mentioned to you before, I was there for about 6 to 9 months, I think, and then they promoted me to sales manager, and I was manager of people who had been there for 20 years, who were like 30 years older than me. But they were, again, very helpful, and they weren't dicks about it in any way, and help finesse me and develop me. And so just been lucky that every single time I've been given an opportunity to lead, whether it's been a sports team or in work, that the people that I've been part of the team with have been very forgiving and helpful at the same time.
So over the years, like I've worked with hundreds of leaders, from first line sales managers through to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and one of the common frustrations I see is people who have natural born leadership skills or instincts, starting from such a young age and getting into leadership at such a young age. You obviously had some natural ability and natural instincts. At what point did you start to realize that you weren't the benchmark, that maybe you were a little bit special and you couldn't expect your team to do exactly what you're able to do as an individual contributor? Did you ever have that aha moment?
Never. I still feel like I'm an imposter and I'm about to get found out at any point in time. And I'm going to wake up and everyone goes, how the hell did you get in your role? And I'll be like, I know, I'm as surprised as you are. So genuinely, I pinch myself every day that I'm in this. I still have no bloody idea how I'm in this privileged position, doing this role in this company with this team. And
but still, like, I remember when I was a sales manager and I'd go and visit customers with my team, and like your situation, some of them were way more experienced than me, and they just wouldn't see things I saw. They weren't naturally designed to be salespeople. They just drifted in there. And I'd tell them over and over, that what I was seeing, and they never seemed to get it. And I was really frustrated until probably my mid-30s and actually got into the training consulting sector and started getting trained myself. And I realized that a lot of what I was doing was based on just stuff I'd acquired naturally. And I was seeing a matrix that my team weren't able to see. And it was at that point I had to start figuring out, okay, how do I inspire them to be better, as themselves, rather than trying to get them to be clones of myself? Did you ever go through that kind of experience, or were you always maybe the opposite, too humble when you thought they were better than you?
No, I've always looked at it like I've been confident enough in certain skills that I've got to bring to the equation, but also very aware that there are other things that I'm just not good at that others are. So one thing I like to think I'm good at is being able to simplify quite complex information and situations down to the most important factor that we need to focus on. One, I like to think that I've got quite high EQ, and I really can tap into the situation we're in and how people are feeling and how to navigate through quite difficult situations, whether it's a commercial negotiation or whatever, to find a path that everyone is relatively happy with. But I also know that I take the least path of resistance and I'll take shortcuts, and every now and then that'll ankle tap me and I'll fall flat on my face because I haven't built that solid foundation, and that I get bored in really, really quickly if it's the same stuff, all day, every day, and where others have that ability to take small steps, knowing that every step they take is a foundation to ensure that there will never be a misstep. whereas I'm a bit more of a risk taker, which can have its pros and its cons. So I've always found that, and what I've done deliberately actually in when I've had the ability to start to build a team versus inherit a team, is create quite an eclectic mix of people around me who have got different backgrounds, ways of thinking, ethnicity, skill sets, and that creates a lot of debate, which I always find gets the best outcome.
Yeah, I found that was something I always struggled with in my early days, is inheriting teams. And once you get in a position, you can start to choose them. It's a little bit easier, but yeah, I definitely struggle with that. How to get people to reach their potential who were quite different from me, and people I inherited and didn't necessarily naturally recognize their strengths. But it's interesting when it sounds like you've had this really, maybe the teacher instinct in yourself has always had you looking for those little ways to trigger the people from the very beginning. It kind of leads me on to one of the while I'd really like to get to know you, I'd also like, you've been a very successful CEO in a number of different fields. So maybe passing on your knowledge to some of the followers here on some key topics that I see as challenges for the companies I work with, and maybe you could give them some advice on. And the first one is vision and engagement. So, when I work with a lot of large companies, they bring me in because they're underperforming in a market that they're struggling to drive change or to grow, and they're not quite sure why. And when I begin projects, I'll always go through an interview, a large capture sample of the employees to see what's really going on, rather than just doing it on senior management's assumptions. And one of the key things I find in every situation is the company's vision is not clear, concise, and it's not engaging. And particularly from the fact that it'll be talking about maybe where the company's looking to head and why that's good for the customers, but very rarely why that's good for the employees, and creating that sort of sense of trust and engagement there. So I feel like that everything does start with that clear and inspiring vision from which you can build your pathways to success, and you can benchmark yourself against where you are today and where you're trying to go and create the pathway through. Is that something you believe in as well?
Yeah, I do. I think there are two parts to a strategy, though, for me. So, the first one is, as you said before, articulating a vision or a mission which inspires and galvanizes the organization to be the best possible version of itself and themselves than they can possibly be, and be motivated every day to know that when you're coming in to be a part of a team and work for an organisation, that you're making a positive contribution to Aotearoa, to the world. That's one. But then you've got to break that down into tangible, specific actions that you can take in the short term, because that vision or mission will never probably be achieved if it's the right one, right? And both are equally important, I think, and both are most powerful when they are reflective of what the organisation already knows to be true, of what your customers already know to be true. So for us, we know that our anchors are in technology and unlocking the magic. Now, that means that as technology changes, and it'll be different in 20 years than it is now, it'll be different in 2 years than it is now, we know that we're going to be at the centre of making sure that that technology and that magic that technology can do for Aotearoa is unlocked. That was one. And that it's going to have intergenerational benefits. So that gives us an aspiration, but plenty of room to move. Phase one for our strategy is being the best at what our customers value the most now. And customers are very clear. I want great connectivity. So give me courage, no black spots, speed. I just want to use my phone and be connected where and when I want it. So that's one. If I need help, I want service fast. So just get that sorted. I want pick up the phone or help me in store and the right person to own it and get it sorted. I want it to be competitive pricing. So I don't have to be, it doesn't have to be the cheapest, but it needs to be, there's a value exchange here that I think is fair. And that's pretty simple. So if you've got a strategy which is be the best of what your customers value the most, when I go and talk to our teams around, hey, we're investing in our network because of great connectivity, we're investing in our service because customers want help when and when they need it, and we're investing in competitive pricing by making moves on handset subsidies, whatever it ends up being, everyone nods their head and goes, yeah, I get that. So, and you're basically presenting back to the organisation the strategy that they know or they've told you is the right strategy. So often the best strategies are not surprising. Like I was just listening to a podcast last week. It was from 2017 on Jeff Bezos, and he said their strategy is based on something that they know will be true in 10 years' time. So he talked about speed of delivery, cheapest prices, vast selection. He said, I know that in 10 years' time, a customer's not going to say to me, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you'd deliver slower. And so if you know that to be true, then that can give you 100% confidence that you're going to invest whatever it takes on getting that speed of delivery as fast as possible to your customers. I know that's true with our network. I know that in 10 years' time, no one's going to say, I love One New Zealand. I just wish you have poorer coverage, slower connectivity, and I couldn't talk to people when I want to. That's just not going to happen. So, so you have to have, for me, I think about strategy in two tiers: the aspirational vision that means that you're always ahead of your competitors and you're thinking about the long term, and then how do you structure it in a way that gives the next kind of clarity for the next 2 to 3 years on what you're going to be focusing on and delivering in the organisation.
Yeah, I think the key here for me is that it's a very practical explanation of the concept, which means the concept itself will be practical. And I see too often that visions are a little bit too abstract, or they're dreaming of 50% growth in a flat market without any mergers or acquisitions. And the team just don't understand where the growth expectations are coming from, particularly if you're talking about a multinational company where they're not directly connected to the home HQ kind of situation. But what you talk about now, it's interesting because a lot of your employees will also be clients, and every one of them is going to have a cell phone, and not one of them would say, man, slow the network down. So I often talk to my clients, say maybe they're more in B2B, and I always talk about if you can create more time for your clients, no one's going to tell you that they've got more time than they need. Or if you can talk about how you impact on profitability, no one's going to ever say we don't want more profit. So simplifying it down to our most practical needs is really interesting there. And I was going to ask you how you go about cascading that down through your team, being that you don't get to see them all the time, but it's the way you deliver it. I don't think there'd be too many people who walk away confused after hearing the message the first time.
Yeah,
how do you reinforce it?
Storytelling is really important. So when I talk about unlocking the magic of technology, most people in the organisation will be sick of hearing me talk about my Commodore 64 from Smith City in Invercargill when I was 12 years old, right? I think storytelling is the most powerful way of bringing things to life. And if it's a story about yourself, people will remember it. So they'll have their own versions of how technology's changed their life and how it's turned up and to be magical. It could be Spotify that's reminded them of a piece of music from their school ball, or when they first met their partner, or whatever it ends up being. So that everyone's got those little moments and little stories. I think people remember stories more than anything else. And I think the other thing as a leader is you'll get sick of it before the organisation does. So just when you think you've communicated your vision or your strategy enough, communicate it another 3 times. You just have to keep on repeating it, and don't apologise for keeping it simple and repetition. It's the most, I think, most powerful way, or one of the most powerful attributes for any high-performing team.
Yeah, I mean, it's echoing myself. I'm sitting here smiling, thinking, man, we've never sat down and had a chance to talk about this, but there's so many things that you're saying that I try to get across to people who have got into leadership positions in very large companies without realizing it. They're very smart people, but they struggle to comprehend that people on the floor level of their businesses, they don't have the helicopter view and understanding of P&L and what we see as fundamental business knowledge. They have no interest in that. So when you give an overly technical vision, they can't translate it down into their world. And I like how you said getting people to think about it in their own terms. So for you, it was a Commodore 64. What does that mean for you? And the repetition, so often it's shared in a kickoff meeting at the start of the year and then never been mentioned again until maybe the next year's kickoff. So in the projects I've worked on where the CEO has reinforced that message every week and every meeting, or giving examples of success stories, the outcomes have always been way better than a CEO doesn't reinforce it. So my real world experience says that's exactly the case. It kind of drifts me on, or takes me on to another topic I'd like to talk about that I think is quite important at the moment. We see in these sort of challenging economic times, you need to be innovative and you're constantly striving for change, because being in technology, you have to lead that. But again, with economic stability, people are constantly worried about their job security and so forth. How do you go about creating that sense of psychological safety in your organization where you're getting that voice of customer from either your shop front, where customers are sharing their expectations through a staff member that you want to cascade up through the organization, or your team members as your customers, what they're experiencing, what they think you could do to improve any aspect of the business? How do you encourage them to feel confident to challenge the status quo and not worry about risking their employment?
Yeah, I think, well, we're in a real world situation in that theme at the moment, because we're making some structural change and we're having a bit of a debate about whether we got the communication right from a psychological safety perspective now. So I think I think pretty much every company in New Zealand is worried about how the economy is tracking, and that shows up for us in things like increased bad debt, so people struggling to pay their bills, or our enterprise customers demanding that if we want to keep their business, that we've got to reduce our rates. And so we didn't factor in to our own budgets that we would get less revenue from our existing customers, or that our customers would stop paying us, and therefore you've got to reduce costs in other areas. And so we always go to the non-people costs first. It's like, travel and entertainment and advertising and all that kind of stuff. But it only helps to a certain point. And so then you're inevitably going to have to make some structural changes where you're going to go, what, this area of the business, it's not making money for us. We're going to not invest in it anymore. So we made the call to, we're not going through a big company-wide restructure. It's only in a few areas in the business, but we decided to make those changes but not send any company-wide emails, because what we were worried is that if we sent this big company-wide email, the first thing everyone would say is, oh shit, is my job going to be impacted? And it would force us to have a whole bunch of conversations in every single area or with every single individual when the majority weren't. But then the media love structure changes, especially in telco industry. So a story came up on Stuff, and we decided, well, if it's going to be in Stuff, we better let the organisation know the context. And so I did a video on the weekend to all staff, and it was interesting. There's some people go, oh, thanks very much for letting us know. Others have gone, were you trying to hide this? So by not doing an all company email, we're trying to sweep it under the carpet and hoping that no one would notice. And that wasn't the case at all. What we were trying to do was create less uncertainty for people by going, actually, we'll have really good one-on-one conversations with the limited number of people that are potentially going to go through change, and not spook everyone else out on the side that they had to worry about their jobs, because they don't. Anyway, I don't think there's any wrong or right answer. My view in that instance is just to be human, call it as you see it, explain the rationale for why you're making a decision, and over time, I think that builds trust. And even if they disagree with the decision that you've made, they can at least respect the context for doing it. So that's one, I think, on psychological safety through change. The other thing on psychological safety, which you mentioned before, isn't structural related, but I suppose you're worried about putting your head above the parapet, and if you get shot in the crossfire as if you challenge the norm or status quo. And I'm encouraging every single one of the team in this organisation to do exactly that. So I meet every one of our new starters on a Monday, and I say to them, you're going to start tomorrow, and straight away, you're going to find something that doesn't make sense to you. And the reason being, it doesn't make sense. You haven't got it wrong, just there's a policy or a guideline or a process that you've come across that's stopping you from being able to do your job to the best of your ability. No one knows how to do your job in that moment to help that customer better than you. Definitely not me. And so you are trusted and empowered to do whatever it takes to get that customer happy. And no one would believe me for a while. And then what I did is I was like, okay, I'm going to give everyone my DFA. This is genuine. This is a true story. So I decided everyone in the organization can have $10 million to spend at any given moment on a customer transaction. And that was like, everyone freaked out and was like, well, you can't do that. And so then we went back to $5,000, what seems like a large amount of money. And we decided that what's the most expensive transaction that will probably happen? It's probably a device replacement. So increasingly, becoming like the most expensive ones are $3,000 now. So everyone in the organisation now knows that at any moment in time, they are trusted to spend $5,000 on that moment. And then the next customer, $5,000 on that moment. And the next, if that's what it takes to help the customer. But do you think that I can get the team to all do that? No. I was like, drives me crazy. I still get emails from customers who have got lost in our systems where they got back from overseas 4 weeks ago. They didn't set roaming up properly. They got a bill for $400 that they weren't expecting. They've been with us for 10 years. They paid their bills on time. They're not taking the piss. They've made a misstep. Now, when they called us or come into our store, that very first moment, the first thing that rep should have done is gone, man, I can imagine how stressful this has been for you. $400 is a lot of money. Just so you know, I'm crediting that $400 straight away. Okay, peace of mind. Second thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to talk to you about how you set your phone up properly and how you use it overseas when you're traveling. Here's the countries when roaming works automatically. Here's the countries where roaming doesn't, and you're much better to make sure you're on Wi-Fi and, blah, 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 and take the time to help that customer. My view is that customer is then a customer for life, right, if you've approached it in that way. But for whatever reason, more and more of our team are making those calls, but still not as many as I would like. And I'm still scratching my head on what that little missing piece is, why 100% of our people are not feeling like they've got that psychological safety to make those calls 100% of the time. So I'm sharing that story, Zane, because I don't have the answer. I just have an intent.
I think, yeah, and there's no correct answer. This is an ever-evolving beast. Like you said, a vision would probably never be achieved because as you get closer, your expectations grow. But I think the key points as I listen to you now is, in my experience, it comes down to trust, which comes down from calm and consistent communication. We've talked about Andrew Webster, the new coach of the New Zealand Warriors, who I'm dying to meet one day because for 25, 26 years before he got there, I was constantly frustrated. But his first ever interview was calm, clear, concise, logical, broken down into steps that I can empathize with. And the message has never changed over the past 12 months. And I see a lot of similarity for you here. My personal experience is a lot of times getting people to buy into change or something like this is actually having that success experience themselves, because they have a lot of fears which are irrational. on what might happen if I get that wrong. Or some people, maybe they've got a rational fear that in a previous life they did something that came back to harm them. So it's about how you encourage your managers, I guess, to actually walk them through a situation like that where they realize that I did it and it had a good outcome for me. And the other thing that occurred to me listening to you there is I often use, when selling value in my value selling training, an example of a customer coming into a shop wanting to buy an iPhone 15 because they often drop their phone in water and they've got an old iPhone 6. So they go straight for the latest and greatest because they hear it's got waterproofing in it. And the sales guy actually asked him, why was it you're after an iPhone 15? He said, waterproof. And he said, do you know that an SE's got that? Oh, I didn't know that. And he actually convinces the guy that the SE's got the value he's looking for because he doesn't need the flash camera and all the like. So you go from a $2,000 sale to an $800 sale. And all of the salespeople look at me and think, why would you do that? We're told we should sell more expensive for the higher end products. You're selling a relationship for life. If that guy buys a $2,000 phone and doesn't like it and goes and complains to a friend and his friend says, actually, didn't you know that an SE has the same thing? What would he do then? If it was me, I'm going back there and I'm going to have a massive fit and I'm probably going to change companies. Whereas if you provide me with a solution that I recognize the value, I'm not leaving. And as a customer, if someone took the example you gave there where my $400 bill was just wiped, where am I going? So I can see where you're trying to go, but I can also imagine the fear of people, in their first 3 months of their job to write off, $400 or $500, which to them is probably, a month's savings. But I think it's encouraging the store managers to help them experience that success for themselves so they can trust that nothing bad happened and potentially good things did.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're describing good revenue and bad revenue. Not all revenue is equal, right?
Right.
Not all margin is equal. And so that $2,000 handset that had $1,200 worth of bad revenue in it, whereas the 800 had 100% good revenue. And businesses like ours, I talk to our team. Most important people in this, our customers are our existing customers. We actually don't need any more new customers. We just need to deepen our relationship with the ones we've got. And that's the best way for us to grow this business, is just to earn the right to play a greater role within our customers' lives by being brilliant at what they buy from us today. So you get that, and you get tenure and loyalty and advocacy from customers when you look after them in the way that you've just outlined. They are customers for you.
I'm mindful of time here, but I kind of like to ask you one question that relates directly to me as someone who switched over to your service recently, and that was probably 100% a reflection on your commitment to the Warriors through COVID. That they're one of the most important things in my life outside my family, which hence you'll see the hat. Which was the reason I was engaged to do it. But the second reason was I'm a busy person and I hate waiting on phone lines. And I noticed you made a tweet about, how your wait times were something 2 or 3 minutes versus a 6-hour experience I had on the phone on hold with a competitor. And which, by the way, during the transition phase quite recently, I actually called your 0800 number and someone answered directly within about a minute, which surprised me. But how did you go about having that reputation as one of the worst customer service companies within the industry to changing the mindset and getting to the point where someone answers my phone call within 1 minute and completely exceeded my expectations? Because that must have been a massive shift.
It was a deliberate decision. Back to the start of our conversation, be the best at what customers value the most, and don't get distracted by the stuff that you think is important, but it's not, like bad revenue. And so we just made deliberate choices to ensure that pricing, connectivity, and service are the 3 biggest and most important pillars. And so be world class at those. And so everything we've done in service, has been about putting the foundations in place. Of course, the best service is no service, so a big part of it is removing the need for service in the first place by creating products that don't have friction in them. Then it's making sure that when you do need that advice, that we've got the right people with the right expertise in place. And it does take a couple of years to do it, right? You got to get, and then the biggest issue in frontline sales and service, as you'll know, is the turnover. So you want to make sure that once you've trained people up, that you can show them there's a career path in the organisation, that they'll stick around for a while. So that's the other part to it. So it's deliberate strategy, really capable people that know a lot about service, much more than I do, putting the money where your mouth is and behind it, and then just having a long-term commitment. And you go from what our perceived and what our actual experience was from a service perspective to now being one of the best in the country and still having ambition to improve even further.
Yeah, it's interesting because I deal predominantly with B2B clients, and I think that I always ask them that they're well-recognized brands in their field, but they don't have the brand continuity in the field because they don't train their salespeople as much as a B2C or retail brand do. And I always ask them to look at telcos as an example because you're dealing with retail staff with a high turnover. But how often do you actually go into a retail shop and ask them about a fundamental service or a product that they look at you and say, I don't know, or I don't have that catalog here? Yet when you're dealing with B2B, countless times I'll see sales reps who are undertrained, they're functioning on instinct. There's no continuity when they have turnover, which really frustrates the customers. And I said, in that case, your customer can't run away because you're going and knocking on their door. But in retail, they may never choose to come back through your door and give you another chance, which is a little bit different. But if they aspire to achieve 50% of what you've done over the past 12 months, that ONE.NZ seems like a familiar brand that's been around for years. I know when I walk in every shop, my previous high-end brand image that I kind of aspired to when I tried to create my website was Lexus and Apple. Practical luxury that feels welcoming, that's attainable for me as an everyday person. I feel like the way your stores are designed now, the way your staff dress, the way they act, it feels like a more luxury experience, but it's friendly and familiar than it was with the company I was with before. So I think you've done a great job, and I hope there are more opportunities for you to share your experience, and I hope other business leaders do take you as an example, because the worst thing is to think we've got it right and stick with what we're doing today, because it won't be enough tomorrow. So I thank you very much for your valuable time here at a busy time of year, and for your frank examples there, particularly regarding the psychological safety. I think a lot of people need that. So I look forward to getting you back on at some stage after the Warriors maybe win the title next year, and we can have a celebratory discussion then.
Up the wires.
Yep. Thanks, Jason. Look forward to talking to you next time.
Cheers, Zane.
See you all next time.